Okay, so Nezih, a lot of your work is related to the changes in the composition of households in the US and the effect for the macroeconomy and also the implications for the design of public policy. So let's talk a bit about what did you learn. So what have been the main changes in the household composition in the US over the last decade?
First, thanks a lot for having me here. So the main changes are the big changes, the decline of marriage. So when you look at let's say 1950s versus today, we see a much smaller fraction of people who are married at a point in time. This is not just in US, but in all developed countries, this is the case. So together with decline of marriage, there has been a rise in the people who are single. They are never married or they are divorced. This is one big development. The second big development has been the huge increase in the married female labor force participation. So if you look at back to 50s, typical household was, a husband that was working at home, in the market, and a wife that stays home and takes care of the children. So that paradigm completely disappeared today. So we have most of the married households are composed of two earners. And then a third change in the US has been an increase in what we call associative mating. That's, this is the likelihood that people who come from same educational background are more likely to get married. So we've seen increase in that. So that means that, people who have, let's say, college graduates are more likely to marry with each other today than they used to be. Okay. So these big change, of course, there is a large amount of work that tries to understand what caused these changes. And there's another big literature that tries to understand consequences of these changes. So on the change, what caused these changes? Well, there has been a change in what we can call technology. But by technology, I mean both the organization of the labor force, which improved the returns to skills and reduced the gender wage gap. So now women can afford to be on their own due to declining gender gap. There has been also a big technological improvements that made running a household much more labor intensive. So think of a household in the first half of the century. You don't have dishwashers, you don't have washing machines, so it's a really labor intensive tasks. By the big improvements in the consumer durables, so the amount of time that you require to run a household decline, and that allow women also to enter the labor force. And for the associative mating part, I think one big factor that has been again the rise in skill premium made cost of marriage down higher for high-skilled people. So think again, you are in 1950s, you are a engineer, and you were more likely to marry, let's say, someone who works in the sales department because your wage is more comparable. Today you are much more apart, so then the marrying people from different educational background become more costly. Of course, there has been cultural change. There has been improvements in the contraceptive technology. There's other factors that affect this, which are very important. And then, what are the consequences for this? Yes, sorry.
So then let's move to the
yes.
consequences. So there may be consequences about on many things, but we would like to focus on the effects of inequality.
Yes.
So that has been rising in the US. So
in terms of inequality, I think the one big result of this change has been the growth of single mother households, which are usually poor in the US and in other countries. So it has been become a big concern for the welfare state. So how to provide support for single women who have children, and the rise of the single woman with children effectively increased inequality. And because if you imagine a world where everybody is married, there's more homogeneity. Now suddenly you have married people versus single people, you have more diversity there. Another factor that also increased inequality is the increase in associative mating. Again, think of a world where there are, rich people and poor people. If they marry each other, then there's much more mixing and there's much more inequality. If they are less likely to marry each other, you get more inequality. Against this, of course, the entrance of the females to the labor force has been an equalizing effect. Because if you think about that, if no woman works, then the inequality is determined by the husband's wages. When women enter to the labor force, unless the wages are perfectly correlated, inequality will go down by construction. Because because now you could have again a highly skilled husband whose wife doesn't work, whereas a low-skilled husband whose wife works, so the household level inequality could be more equal because of the female labor force participation. So there are these two effects, but overall I think the inequality has been increasing over time, and the household structures kind of contributed to this somehow. Changes in the household structure has contributed to this.